Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to take a look at Woodpecker's new joinery sled. This thing is sweet. It's like a tenoning jig on steroids. I like this thing a lot. This is a tenoning jig that I had made and used for a few years, and it's great, but it can't do much more than 90 degrees. Of course, you can move this piece to different angles, but on this new joinery sled, this actually tilts. You can move this thing in and out. You have a built-in micro adjust here, clamping options like these little guys right here, or you can use some track clamps. This thing does a lot. So let's get right into this thing, and I want to show you guys how this thing works. Alright, so let's just start by going from the bottom up and how this thing actually rides in your table saw. So the joinery sled rides in your table saw with this miter bar right here, and this miter bar is really nice. It requires zero adjustment, and there's no play in this thing at all. It rides nice and smooth. On my one that I built that you see here, I had this adjustable fence that I would kind of just straddle my my table saw fence. I'd clamp it up tight and ride it along there. And yeah, so these are two different ways that these things work. But let's take a closer look at this miter bar. Alright, so I got this thing flipped upside down so we can take a look at this miter bar. So this thing is 18.5 inches long, 3/4 of an inch wide, and 3/8 of an inch thick. And it has these 4 nylon leaf springs right here. And this is kind of like the secret sauce of this miter bar. And this is why I say it's like automatic adjusting. Okay, there's a lot of different miter bars out there where they have these set screws and you got to take your time and dial in each one. That's not how these 4 work. They automatically adjust because they compress and apply pressure to the left side of your miter slot, and they keep the miter bar riding tight up against the right side of your miter slot. So there's constant pressure with these things. And they've had these miter bars for a couple of years now, and they've used them on different miter gauges and stuff. And they've not worn down on me. They've done great. I love this technology. I wish everyone would use miter bars like these. Alright, next let's slide this thing into the miter slot. And then get a look at the adjustability of this base. Because this thing is super adjustable. You can adjust this to fit pretty much any table saw and any router table as well. Now, the reason this thing is so adjustable for any table saw and router table is because you have 9 inches of travel between the bottom base and then this top, like, secondary base. So to move this bottom base, and this you'll only have to move to dial it in and square it up to your cutting tool, whether that's your table saw blade or your router bit. That's the only time you'll really move this. But as you can see, you can slide that really far. And so once you get it where you want, and I'll show you guys how to set all this up here in a minute, but once you get it where you want, I'm going to set it back here a little bit. Okay. Once you get it where you want, you can lock those down right there with your Allen wrench. And then you still have 3.5 inches of, I guess I'm going to call it the macro adjust. You have that right here, so it can slide. And it slides very well, and this always remains nice and parallel to the base, and I'll show you how that works in just a second. So with all 4 of these knobs loose, you can slide this wherever you want. Once you get it close to where you want it, you just lock these black knobs here, leave the red knobs loose, and then you can use this micro adjust. And it's a super fine pitch screw. It's very nice. It operates super smoothly. In a little bit, I'm going to show you how to cut a bridal joint on here, so you'll get to see it in action. But yeah, you got 3.5 inches of adjustment up here as well, and then the 5.5 inches with these slots down here. Now remember how I said how this thing always remains parallel to the base. Now that relies on what's under here in this little compartment. So these knobs, they have no functionality other than to screw on this little cover to these two bearings, okay? And the identical thing is over here. There's two more bearings. I'll just take everything off so you can see it. Now, with those off, let me loosen everything. You can see how everything rides nice and smooth. There's no real shifting in the base. It's always going to travel in a perfect linear motion because of these bearings. Even if we lock up the micro adjust here, you can really get a look at how all that operates. Now the reason that those two covers are on there are just to protect them from dust, because if you get dust buildup in here, of course with the way dust works, it's going to interfere with the travel, with the bearings in there. So these act as just covers to just protect your bearings. So I hope that makes sense. I'm going to go ahead and snap these back on there real quick. Okay, last thing we need to take a look at are this right here and this right here. And these, on the bottom side, there are some leveling feet. And it has this little set screw that you can raise and lower to get it perfectly even with your surface of your table saw or your router table. So you just stick a little Allen wrench down in there like that, and then you can lower them. And what those leveling feet do is to help this thing from tipping out of the miter slot. So if for some reason you have this all the way extended like that, those leveling feet are touching the table saw surface down here, and they prevent it from racking back and forth like that. Real quick, I'm going to flip this thing over so you guys can get a better look at those leveling feet. So here they are right here. They're just little nylon set screws, and you can raise and lower them as you need, just to prevent any tipping and to give this tool even more stability. Okay, so now that you guys understand how that side of the joinery sled works, I'm just going to throw this in here and we'll go over the fence and your clamping options. So first, let's take a look at your hold down options. So the joinery sled ships with two of these hold down pivot clamps is what they're called. And they are plenty sufficient to hold down your workpiece, but in my opinion, they are finicky. They work fine, but I like track clamps better. I just want to show you guys these because this is what the tool ships with. So you can use these to hold down your workpiece, or you can use track clamps, which is what I prefer. It's just a little easier to use, especially when you're switching in between work pieces. You have to constantly worry about this thing flopping down like that. Kind of gets annoying. So on wider work pieces, you'll have no issue using this ratcheting clamp. On skinnier ones, the ratcheting system might interfere with the fence, but this one I believe is about 2 1/4 inches wide. Ratcheting clamp works no problem. My favorite kind of track clamp are ones with a threaded handle like this. And this threaded handled track clamp, it's made by Semble. That's what I've been using with the joinery sled, and that's what I would recommend for you to pick up if you're gonna get this system too. But next, let's take a look at this fence system. So this fence, you're able to set to pretty much any angle. I've set it to 45 degrees and pretty much anywhere in between. And then you can also adjust it up and down. And there is a stop to lock in the up and down travel. I'll show you that in just a second. But once you get it where you want, there's also this sacrificial piece up front here. It's made out of MDF. If you buy the joinery sled, I believe it comes with one. And you don't have to use this. You can also just use a scrap piece of wood if you want. You could remake these inserts if you wanted out of MDF, but Woodpeckers sells replacements for these as well. So after you loosen all 3 screws, you can lower this to set it wherever you need to set it. And what I like to do is, you can see I used one end and then I used another end, and you have 3 screws here that hold this into place. You always need at least 2 screws in here. So once you have used enough of this sacrificial fence that you're not able to tighten it down with these 2 screws, you'll want to make a new one or buy a new one or do whatever you got to do. But next, let's flip around to the back side here, and I'm going to show you this stop that you can set for the aluminum fence so that you can ensure this never accidentally drops too low to where it could come in contact with your blade. Alright, so around back here you can see these 2 knobs that you can loosen to raise and lower your fence, change the angle, do whatever you need to do. So, once you are going to make your cut, you definitely want to set this aluminum fence high enough so that your blade will not come in contact with this fence. So let's say I want to set it right here. But periodically I'm still going to have to shift this and make sure that I can set this to 90 degrees. But you don't want to risk this accidentally dropping down and hitting your blade. So what they have is on the bottom one here, there's this black set screw. And once you get it to the proper height, you can use an 1/8 inch Allen wrench and tighten that up. And then on the inside here, there's a nylon set screw that comes in contact with the fence. That only twisted because I didn't have this locked up all the way. But what you can see is that even when I loosen this, and then I go ahead and loosen the bottom one as well, the vertical position of this fence does not change. It can't accidentally drop down and hit my blade. I really like that feature a lot. I was pleasantly surprised when I saw that they included this on here. And it's cool because, yeah, your fence is never going to hit your blade, but you're still able to adjust your angle. So that's a very handy feature. Okay, last thing I want to go over before we get into actually dialing this into our blade and then setting up to cut our bridal joint is I want to show you how you can adjust the angle by simply loosening these 2 knobs, and then you can adjust this thing all the way up to 91 degrees and 46 degrees. So they give you an additional degree in either direction. There's no positive stops. When you go to set this thing up, you'll want to use something like a bevel gauge. They included no positive stops on purpose because every table saw is different, and the positive stops aren't really going to be any use for you because, like I said, yeah, everyone's is different. So I think I had this set to 22.5 degrees, and so to do that, you just line it up with your table at either end, and then you can go ahead and lock it in place for when you're making like steep miter cuts. Okay, so now that you guys understand how all this works, I want to walk through the setup process of how you get this thing to ride perfectly parallel to your blade. So the first thing I'm going to do is loosen these handles and set this table back to perfectly square. So I'll set this end, square it up, tighten her down, and then verify the other end, and we're good to go. Alright, now that that's all square, I got this Allen wrench, and we can loosen these two screws right here to adjust this so that it's parallel to our blade. So I got that loose. This can move wherever. I'm going to go ahead and raise this blade up. And then I'm just going to remove this fence so that it's out of the way. Okay, so now that that's all done, I got this blade raised up. And I'm going to slide this forward. And you're just going to want to grab something that is like perfectly dimensioned. So I already squared up this board, and you could use this, or you could use something like this add an inch block. Doesn't need to be anything crazy. So here at the front, I am going to press that up against the table, and then scoot that over until it comes in contact with the tooth of my table saw blade. Now that that's good, I'll snug that up, and then I'm going to bring it back like this and do the same thing down here. Once that's good, go ahead and tighten that up as well. It's right and looks nice. I'm going to recheck down here. And you'll probably have to adjust this just a couple times just to dial it in perfectly. But once you get it set, you can really make pretty much all your adjustments by sliding that top portion back and forth. Alright, once you get that all dialed in and perfectly parallel to your blade, you can go ahead and reinstall your fence. And I'm going to set this aluminum fence just a bit higher than the workpiece that I'm going to be making this bridal joint on. And once I got that set up, I'm going to tighten this set screw in the back so that my fence can't go too low. And the last bit of adjustment for the fence is I'm just going to square it up by referencing the back of the fence. And that is perfectly square. So, if you've never seen a bridal joint before, here it is. You just got this tongue here and then this groove right in the center, and they snap together like that, and it looks pretty nice. So first we're going to cut the female end, and then we will cut the male end. And to mark everything out, I like to use this MT center gauge. So I'm going to set that down. And we'll make a mark on either side of this bar. And there we go. Perfectly centered. Next, I'm going to lower my blade until it's just a hair above my workpiece. That looks good. Okay. Now I can set my workpiece in place, and we will clamp it up and then adjust its left to right position so that we can cut as close to center as we can. We'll make a cut on both sides with both faces touching this fence here so that we can ensure that it's perfectly center. So after I got it clamped up, I'm going to loosen my micro adjust right here and slide this over until that blade is as center as I can get it where I made that layout mark. And that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to lock this up, and we are ready to make our first cut. course, I didn't have my dust collection turned on for that. That's okay. So I cut the one side, and then now to ensure that it's perfectly center, I'm just gonna flip that around and then clamp that back in place, and we'll make one more cut. Okay. So now that that's done, I'm going to leave this clamped up. This is the easy part. Cutting that first component is the easiest. So next, I'm going to loosen that micro adjust, and we're going to slide this over so we can cut our other piece. So I'm going to slide this over so that the inside edge right here is even with the inside edge of this blade. And it's better to undershoot it than to overshoot it, because then you'll make a tongue that's too small and it won't be good. You'll have to grab a new workpiece. So that looks pretty darn good. I'm going to tighten that sucker back up. And now we can go ahead and clamp up our other workpiece. Alright, now I'm going to send this through and see how it goes. Once you got one side done, unclamp, and we're going to flip to the other side and make our cut. Alright, let's see how we did. Alright, I got super lucky on that cut. I had to take it back and do one more cut because I didn't push it all the way through my saw, so it was a little wavy. But I just did that off camera real quick, and it came together perfectly. Before I had to take at least 2, maybe 3 attempts to dial it in, but that one works good, so I guess I'm getting the hang of it. Check that out. This tool is sweet. This tool is super satisfying to use. That's about it though. I hope you guys enjoyed this little tutorial of Woodpecker's new joinery sled. If you are interested in picking this up, I'll put a link below down in the description. And if you have any questions, let me know. Like I said, you can use this either on your table saw or at your router table, whichever one that you want. I'm going to use it most of the time at my table saw, so that's why I showed you it here today. If you guys are interested in seeing it at the router table, let me know, and I will try to make a video. But till next time, I'll see you guys. Thanks.